The night my boyfriend called me clingy was the same night I finally stopped clinging to a version of love that didn't exist. I remember standing under the string lights outside the reception hall. The music from inside muffled by thick wooden doors, my cheeks still burning from humiliation. My sister's laughter floated through the glass like something from another world, light, joyful, untouched. And there I was, staring at a man I had loved for 2 years as if I had never truly seen him before. But to understand that moment, you have to understand who I was before it. My name is Paige Donovan. I'm the middle daughter in a family that believes in Sunday dinners and handwritten thank you notes. My older sister, Chloe, has always been the radiant one, the kind of woman who walks into a room and somehow makes it warmer. Deckley. My parents used to joke that she was born smiling. I was quieter. I watched more than I spoke. I noticed things, and maybe that's why I noticed the cracks in my relationship with Garrett long before I admitted they were fractures. Garrett's slate was ambitious in a way that could be intoxicating. He wore tailored suits even to casual dinners. He shook hands firmly. He said words like leverage and synergy without irony. When we first met at a charity fundraiser downtown, he told me he was building something big. I believed him. I believed in him. For 2 years, I tried to fit into his world, cocktail hours, networking brunches, conversations that always circled back to acquisitions and market share. He worked in corporate development and had been chasing an opportunity with a firm called Sterling Partners for months. I knew the name because he said it so often it felt like a third person in our relationship. Once I land this, he would tell me, adjusting his cufflinks in the mirror, everything changes. I thought he meant for us. When Chloe announced her engagement, I was genuinely happy. She had met Daniel at a volunteer event, and their love felt easy, like breathing. He laughed with his whole body. He looked at her like she was something precious. Watching them together sometimes made my chest ache in a way I couldn't quite name. The wedding was planned for early autumn at a renovated vineyard just outside the city. The air would be cool, Chloe said, the leaves just beginning to turn. It would be romantic. I invited Garrett 6 months in advance. This is important to me, I told him one evening while we ate takeout on my apartment floor, surrounded by unopened mail and his ever-present laptop bag. I want you to really be there, not just physically. I want you to meet everyone. Sit with my dad. Dance with my mom. Be part of it. He kissed my forehead absent-mindedly, eyes still on his phone. Of course, Paige. Relax. It's just a wedding. Just a wedding. The morning of the ceremony, I woke before my alarm. Sunlight slipped through the curtains, pale and soft. I lay there for a moment listening to the quiet hum of the city outside my window. My stomach fluttered, not nerves for Chloe, but hope. A small, stubborn hope that maybe this would be the day Garrett and my world blended together. He arrived at my apartment already dressed, navy suit pressed sharp enough to cut paper. You look beautiful, he said, giving me a quick once, over in my pale blue bridesmaid dress. There was something rehearsed in the way he said it. On the drive to the vineyard, he took a call. I watched trees blur past while he spoke in clipped, confident tones about projections and pipeline opportunities. At one point he said, "Yes, I'll be at the Donovan wedding. I hear some Sterling people might attend." My heart sank just a little. "Who from Sterling?" I asked when he hung up. He shrugged. "Not sure. A few senior folks were invited. Daniel's uncle has connections." I nodded, pretending that didn't explain the sharpness suddenly in his posture. The ceremony itself was perfect. Chloe walked down the aisle with our father, her veil catching the late afternoon light. I held her bouquet before handing it back, and when she squeezed my fingers, I felt the tremor of her emotion. Garrett sat beside me, but he checked his watch twice. At the reception, the vineyard glowed, string lights draped from wooden beams. The smell of roasted garlic and fresh bread drifted through the air. Glasses clinked. Someone's aunt was already crying. I introduced Garrett to my parents. "This is the man who steals our wage away every weekend," my father teased, extending his hand. Garrett's smile was polished. "Sir, it's an honor. Congratulations on your daughter." He spoke like he was pitching a client. Within 20 minutes, he had excused himself to circulate. I watched him scan the room the way a hunter might, eyes sharp, calculating. He spotted a cluster of men near the bar, suits darker than the rest, laughter controlled and measured. "Be right back," he murmured, already moving. I stood there, holding 2 champagne flutes. Dinner seating cards were arranged on a long wooden table near the entrance. I found our names, Paige Donovan and Garrett Slate, at table 7, close to the dance floor. When I reached the table later, his chair was empty. "Where's Garrett?" my cousin Lily asked, scooting over to make space for me. "He's networking," I said lightly. A few minutes later, I saw him across the room. He wasn't at table 7. He was seated at table 2, the one near the head table, where a small, discreet card read Sterling Partners. My throat tightened. I walked over slowly, heels sinking slightly into the grass beneath the tent. He was mid-laugh, leaning toward a silver-haired man in a charcoal suit. Garrett noticed me and gave a quick, tight smile. "Oh, Paige," he said, as if I had interrupted something crucial. We adjusted seating. "Hope that's okay." Adjusted seating. The silver-haired man nodded politely at me. I could feel my face warming, but I kept my voice steady. "Our names were at table 7. "Yeah, well," Garrett replied, lowering his voice. "This makes more sense. Makes more sense." I stood there for a second too long, aware of the hum of conversation around me. The faint scent of red wine, the flicker of candlelight. Something inside me shifted, not shattered yet, just tilted. "Of course," I said finally. "I'll see you later." As I walked back to my assigned table alone, the music swelled for the first dance. Chloe and Daniel stepped onto the floor, wrapped in each other, smiling like the world had narrowed down to just them. I clapped with everyone else, but my hands felt strangely empty. And somewhere between the appetizer and the first toast, I began to understand that I had brought the wrong man to the right celebration. I told myself not to overreact. That has always been my flaw. I minimize my own discomfort to keep the peace. From table 7, I had a perfect view of Garrett at table 2. He leaned in when others spoke. He nodded thoughtfully. He laughed half a beat after everyone else, as if calibrating himself to match their rhythm. Every now and then, he adjusted his jacket and glanced around the room, not for me, but to see who might be watching him. My mother came to sit beside me during the salad course. She smelled faintly of her rose perfume, the one she only wore for special occasions. "Where's your young man?" she asked gently. "He's sitting closer to the business guests," I said, keeping my eyes on my plate. She followed my gaze across the tent. I watched her expression shift, not judgment, just quiet understanding. "Oh," she murmured. "Well, I suppose some people never miss an opportunity." It wasn't criticism, it was observation. And somehow that stung more. I tried to enjoy the evening. I really did. Chloe's college friends pulled me into conversation. My uncle made a dramatic speech about love being an endurance sport. Laughter rippled across the tables. But every time I looked toward table 2, Garrett was more animated than I had seen him all month. When the maid of honor speech began, I stood, smoothed my dress, and walked to the microphone. My heart was pounding, but not from nerves. I found Chloe's face in the crowd. She was glowing, mascara slightly smudged from happy tears. "I've known my sister my entire life," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "And if there's one thing I've learned from her, it's that love isn't loud. It's steady. It shows up. It stays." The words caught in my throat for half a second. I glanced, involuntarily, toward table 2. Garrett wasn't looking at me. He was whispering something to the silver-haired man beside him. A small crack formed somewhere deep in my chest. I finished the speech without faltering. People applauded. Chloe mouthed, "I love you." I smiled back. When I returned to my seat, my cousin squeezed my hand. "That was beautiful." "Thank you," I whispered. But inside, something had shifted from tilt to fracture. After dinner, the music grew louder. The band transitioned into something upbeat. Couples drifted to the dance floor. Garrett finally approached me, loosening his tie slightly. "Good speech," he said. "You always did have a way with words." "Did you hear it?" I asked quietly. He hesitated a fraction too long. Most of it. Before I could respond, One of the men from table 2 clapped him on the shoulder. "Garrett, we were just talking about that acquisition in Denver." Garrett's entire posture changed, energized, alert. "Be right there," he said, already stepping away. He didn't ask me to dance. He didn't ask if I wanted a drink. He didn't notice that I was standing there alone again. I stepped outside the tent for air. The vineyard stretched into the darkness, rows of vines silhouetted against a sky dusted with stars. The music inside was muffled now, replaced by the soft hum of crickets. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to steady the heat rising in my chest. I wasn't angry yet. I was embarrassed. Embarrassed that my boyfriend was treating my sister's wedding like a networking event. Embarrassed that I had asked him, pleaded with him, really, to show up for me tonight. "Are you hiding from the dance floor too?" The voice startled me. I turned to see a man leaning casually against one of the wooden posts near the edge of the patio. He held a glass of bourbon, untouched. His suit was dark gray, tie slightly loosened, but unlike Garrett, there was no tension in him. "I wouldn't say hiding," I replied carefully. "Just taking a break," he smiled. Not the sharp, calculated smile I'd grown used to, but something warmer, curious. "Marcus," he said, extending his hand. "Paige," Breed sighed. He asked, "Sister," his eyebrows lifted, "then you deserve a medal. Weddings are harder on siblings than anyone admits." I laughed softly. "That's strangely accurate." For a moment we just stood there, the night air cool against my bare shoulders. "You gave the speech," he said. I blinked. "You heard it, every word." There was something steady in the way he said it. It was honest, he continued. "That's rare." I felt my throat tighten unexpectedly. "Thank you." He tilted his head slightly. "Your boyfriend didn't look like he was listening." The bluntness caught me off guard. I glanced toward the tent where Garrett's silhouette was visible near the bar, gesturing animatedly. "He's ambitious," I said carefully. Marcus took a slow sip of his drink. "Ambition's not the same as presence." The words settled between us. Inside, the band shifted to a slower song. Couples began pairing off again. Marcus set his glass down on a nearby table. "May I?" He extended his hand, simple and respectful. I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, but because I could already hear Garrett's voice in my head. "Don't make a scene. Don't embarrass me." But I realized something in that moment. I hadn't done anything wrong. "I'd like that," I said. His hand was warm, steady. He didn't pull me close immediately. He gave me space, letting me set the distance. We stepped onto the edge of the dance floor. The lights overhead cast a soft glow over everything. The laughter, the spinning dresses, the clinking glasses. Marcus didn't talk much while we danced. He asked simple questions. Where did I grow up? What did I do for work? What was Chloe like as a child? And he listened. Not the way someone listens while waiting for their turn to speak, but the way someone listens because they care about the answer. Halfway through the song, I felt it. A stare. I turned my head slightly and saw Garrett across the dance floor. He wasn't smiling. He was watching us with a look I had never seen before. Sharp, possessive, furious. My stomach dropped. The song hadn't even ended when he started walking toward us. And suddenly, I knew this night was about to break open in a way I couldn't control. I saw it in his stride before he even reached us. Garrett didn't walk toward me. He advanced. Marcus must have felt the shift in my posture because his hand loosened slightly at my waist. Not possessive, not defensive, just aware. "Paige," Garrett said sharply, stopping a little too close. "Can I talk to you?" The music was still playing, soft and slow, but the world around us seemed to quiet in that strange way it does when something is about to unravel. Marcus stepped back immediately. Of course, there was no tension in him. No territorial energy. Just courtesy. Garrett didn't acknowledge him. He grabbed my wrist, not painfully, but firmly enough that I had no choice but to follow, as he steered me off the dance floor and toward the side of the tent. "Garrett," I whispered, trying to keep my voice even. "You're making a scene. A scene." He let out a short, humorless laugh. "You're the one slow dancing with some random guy at your sister's wedding." I was dancing. I said carefully. You've been networking all night. That's different. The words landed like a slap. We pushed through the tent flap and out into the cool night air. The music dulled behind us again. The vineyard stretched out, dark and endless. He finally released my wrist. What exactly are you trying to prove? He demanded. Prove, I repeated, genuinely confused. I wasn't proving anything. I was standing alone most of the evening. Garrett, you moved tables without telling me. His jaw tightened. Because I had to. Do you have any idea who's here tonight? I know who's here, I said quietly. My family, my sister. The people I asked you to spend time with. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. This is important for my career, Paige. Paige. Sterling doesn't just hand out opportunities, I have to be visible. And I don't. The question slipped out before I could soften it. He stared at me as if I'd said something absurd. This isn't about you. There it was. The clean, unvarnished truth. I felt something inside me go very still. For 2 years, I said slowly. I've supported you. I've shown up to your events. I've smiled through conversations where no one even bothered to learn my name. I asked you for one night, to show up for me. I am here, he snapped. Physically, I replied. The silence between us grew heavy. Inside the tent, I could hear the band transition to a livelier song. Someone cheered. Glasses clinked. Garrett looked back toward the light spilling from the entrance. You're being clingy, he said finally, his tone cold now. Controlled. This is exactly what I was afraid of. The word hit harder than I expected. Clingy. As if wanting your partner beside you at your sister's wedding was a flaw. I asked you to dance, I said quietly. You said you'd be right back. You've been right back for 3 hours. He shook his head. You don't understand how this works. These relationships matter. And I don't. His expression shifted then. Not angry, not even frustrated, just dismissive. I can't do this, he said flatly. I blinked. Do what? This, he repeated, gesturing vaguely between us. The constant need for reassurance, the emotional pressure. It's exhausting, exhausting. The irony almost made me laugh. You're ending our relationship, I said slowly, making sure I understood him, because I danced with someone after you ignored me all night. He didn't hesitate. Yes, the word echoed in the darkness. For a moment I thought I might cry. I felt the sting behind my eyes, the tightness in my throat. But something unexpected happened instead. The hurt didn't explode. It settled, like dust finally landing after a long storm. Okay, I said. Garrett looked startled. Okay. If that's how you see me, I continued, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me, then maybe we shouldn't do this. He studied my face, perhaps expecting tears, pleading, an apology. I gave him none. He straightened his jacket almost reflexively. I'll grab my things. You drove separately, I reminded him. Another flicker of irritation crossed his face. Fine, he muttered. I'll say goodbye to a few people. Of course he would. He turned and walked back toward the tent without another word. I stood there alone under the string lights, the cool night air brushing against my skin. My wrist still tingled faintly where he had grabbed it. 2 years, gone in less than 5 minutes. I expected devastation. Instead, I felt clear, like I had been holding my breath for a very long time and had finally exhaled. After a few moments, I walked back inside. The party was still alive. Chloe was laughing with Daniel near the cake table. My parents were dancing, my father's steps slightly offbeat as always. And near the bar I saw Marcus again. He wasn't scanning the room, he wasn't posturing. He was simply watching the dance floor with an easy expression, as if he belonged wherever he stood. When his eyes met mine, he didn't look smug or curious. He looked concerned. You all right? He asked gently as I approached. I nodded once. We broke up. He didn't look surprised. I'm sorry, he said, and somehow, the way he said it made it feel less like pity and more like respect. Before I could respond, I noticed movement near the head table. The silver-haired man Garrett had been speaking to earlier was standing beside Marcus now, and he was looking directly at me. There was something knowing in his gaze, something that told me this night wasn't finished unfolding yet. The silver-haired man approached us with unhurried steps, the kind of confidence that doesn't need to announce itself. Up close, I noticed the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the kind carved by decades of measured decisions. His suit was impeccably tailored, but there was nothing flashy about him, just presence. "Paige, right?" he asked, his voice smooth but grounded. I blinked. "Yes, I'm Thomas Ellery." He extended his hand. "I work with Sterling Partners." The name settled into my chest like a dropped stone. Sterling Partners. For months, that company had hovered over my relationship like a third shadow. I had heard about their acquisitions, their strategic expansions, their selective recruitment process. Garrett spoke about them the way some people talk about Ivy League schools, reverently, obsessively. I shook Thomas's hand politely. "Nice to meet you." Marcus stood beside him, quiet, observant. "I hope you don't mind me saying," Thomas continued, glancing briefly toward the dance floor. "You handled yourself with remarkable grace this evening. I felt heat creep into my cheeks." "I'm not sure what you mean." Thomas's expression softened, but there was steel beneath it. "We notice things," he said simply. Before I could respond, Marcus finally spoke. "Paige, I should probably introduce myself properly." There was a subtle shift in his tone, not boastful, not performative, just transparent. "I'm Marcus Webb," he said, "Senior Vice President of Acquisitions at Sterling." The air seemed to thin. For a second, I thought I might have misheard him. I glanced between the two men. Garrett's entire evening, the table change, the laughter, the aggressive networking, flashed through my mind in rapid succession. He had been trying to impress Sterling, and he had just publicly humiliated and broken up with me in front of their senior leadership. Marcus must have seen the realization settle over me because he added gently, "I wasn't here in a professional capacity tonight. Daniel's family and mine go back a long way. Of course, this wasn't a corporate mixer. It was a wedding." And suddenly, every calculated move Garrett had made felt painfully small. "I didn't know," I murmured. Marcus offered a faint smile. "You weren't supposed to." Thomas gave a small nod. "We value character as much as capability at Sterling. Tonight was illuminating." My heart pounded, not from vindication, but from something quieter, clarity. Across the room, I saw Garrett re-enter the tent from the opposite side. His expression was composed again, business, ready. He scanned the space and quickly located Thomas and Marcus standing with me. His posture changed instantly. He walked toward us, confidence carefully reconstructed. "I was hoping to speak with you again before the evening wrapped." Thomas regarded him calmly but did not immediately take his hand. "Mr. Slate," he replied evenly. Garrett's smile faltered almost imperceptibly. "I just wanted to reiterate my interest in the Denver portfolio," Garrett continued, words crisp and rehearsed. "I believe my experience positions me uniquely. Experience matters." Thomas interrupted gently. "So does judgment." The silence that followed was surgical. Garrett's eyes flicked briefly toward me, then toward Marcus. Recognition dawned. "You've met Marcus," Thomas added. Garrett swallowed. Marcus held his gaze, steady and unreadable. "I believe we observed enough this evening," Thomas said, his tone still polite, still measured. "Sterling prioritizes long-term partnerships built on trust and respect. Those qualities aren't situational." Garrett's composure cracked, just slightly. "And, measure?" "I'm not sure I understand," he said. Thomas finally took his extended hand, but only to give it a brief, formal shake. "I'm sure you do," he replied. The dismissal was subtle, but unmistakable. Garrett's jaw tightened. He looked at Marcus again, perhaps searching for a softer reaction. Marcus simply said, "Enjoy the rest of the wedding." And that was it. No raised voices. No dramatic accusations. Just quiet consequence. Garrett stood there for a moment, as if waiting for someone to laugh and reveal it was all a misunderstanding. No one did. His gaze finally landed on me. For the first time that night, he looked uncertain. "Paige," he began, lowering his voice slightly. "Can we talk?" There it was again, the sudden awareness of my existence when it suited him. I held his gaze calmly. "I think we've said everything we needed to say," I replied. Something flickered in his eyes then, calculation returning. "You knew," he asked quietly. "Knew what? Who he was?" I shook my head. "No." A beat passed. He exhaled sharply, frustration slipping through. "This was blown out of proportion," he muttered. "It was just a misunderstanding." It wasn't. Because it wasn't about Marcus. It wasn't about Sterling. It was about the way Garrett had treated me when he thought no one important was watching. That was the part he couldn't undo. Around us, the wedding carried on. Laughter swelled near the cake table as Chloe and Daniel fed each other the first slice. My father's booming voice echoed somewhere near the bar. Life was continuing. Garrett straightened his shoulders one last time. "I'll be in touch," he said stiffly. I didn't respond. He walked away. Not toward the dance floor this time, but toward the exit. I watched him leave the vineyard, his polished shoes crunching softly against the gravel path. And for the first time in 2 years, I felt light. Not triumphant, not vindictive, just free. Marcus stood quietly beside me. "You didn't deserve that," he said. I looked at my sister across the room, glowing in her white dress, surrounded by love that was steady and present. "No," I agreed gently. I didn't cry that night. That surprised me the most. For 2 years, Garrett had been woven into the fabric of my routines: Sunday coffee, midweek phone calls, shared calendars, quiet dinners where he half listened while drafting emails in his head. I had imagined our future in small, practical ways, not fairy tale grand, just steady. And yet, when he walked out of that vineyard alone, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt unburdened. Marcus didn't hover. That's something I appreciated immediately. He didn't try to capitalize on the moment or step into a role that wasn't his. He simply stayed nearby, offering quiet company. "Would you like to get some water?" he asked after a few minutes. I nodded. My throat felt dry in that way it does, after holding back words for too long. We walked to the bar. The bartender handed me a glass, condensation cool against my palm. I took a slow sip and let the music settle back into my body. Across the room, Chloe caught my eye. She mouthed, "Are you okay?" I smiled and gave her a small nod. This was her night. I refused to let my heartbreak stain it. "Your sister seems happy," Marcus observed. "She is," I said softly. "Daniel shows up, even when it's inconvenient, especially when it's inconvenient." Marcus studied me for a moment, not in a way that felt invasive, more like he was measuring the weight of my words. "Showing up consistently," he said, "is underrated." I laughed quietly, apparently. There was a pause between us, not awkward, just thoughtful. "I hope this doesn't sound inappropriate," Marcus began carefully, "but I'm glad you danced." I raised an eyebrow slightly. "Even though it caused all that?" He shook his head faintly. "Because you looked like yourself when you did, not like someone waiting." The simplicity of that observation struck deeper than any dramatic compliment could have. Waiting. That's what I had been doing for 2 years. Waiting for Garrett to settle down after the next promotion. Waiting for him to call back when he got busy. Waiting for him to prioritize something that wasn't strategic. Waiting for him to choose me without being prompted. I hadn't realized how much of my life had been suspended in anticipation. "I don't think I was brave tonight," I said quietly. Marcus tilted his head. "No, I think I was just tired." He smiled gently. "Sometimes that's the same thing." The rest of the evening unfolded without incident. Garrett didn't return. No dramatic reappearance. No apology text lighting up my phone. Just absence. And for once, absence felt honest. Later, when the crowd thinned and the last dance was announced, I found myself on the dance floor again, this time with my father. He held my hand the way he used to when I was a little girl standing on his shoes, giggling as he shuffled us around the living room. "You all right, Peanut?" he asked quietly, using the nickname he hadn't used in years. I nodded against his shoulder. "I think so." He didn't push further, he just tightened his grip slightly, steady, protective. When the reception finally wound down and guests began collecting coats, my mother slipped her arm through mine. "I saw," she said softly, not elaborating. "I know," she kissed my temple. "You handled yourself with grace. There was no lecture, no dramatic sympathy, just pride, and that meant everything." Marcus approached as we said our goodbyes. "I'll let you get back to your family," he said. "But I wanted to wish you well, Paige." I hesitated for a moment. "Thank you," I replied. "For earlier." He nodded once. "Take care of yourself." He didn't ask for my number. He didn't make promises. He simply walked away, and somehow, that felt respectful in a way I hadn't realized I needed. The fallout didn't take long. By Monday morning, word had spread quietly through Garrett's professional circles. Not gossip, just observation. Sterling had passed, and not only passed, but done so decisively. I didn't hear it from Marcus. I heard it from Garrett. His name flashed across my phone screen that afternoon. I stared at it for a full minute before answering. "Hello." His voice was tight, controlled, but strained. "What exactly did you say to them?" "Nothing," I replied honestly. "Don't play innocent, Paige. They pulled the Denver conversation entirely." Thomas barely looked at me. "I didn't say a word," I repeated. There was a long silence on the other end. "You embarrassed me," he said finally. I almost laughed. "You ended our relationship at my sister's wedding," I said calmly. "You called me clingy for wanting you to sit at the table we were assigned. That's not what this is about." "It is," I replied gently. "It's exactly what this is about." Another silence. For the first time, I heard something unfamiliar in his breathing. Regret, but not the kind rooted in love, the kind rooted in consequence. "I can fix this," he muttered, more to himself than to me. Maybe he could, but not with me. "I hope you do," I said sincerely. "Just not at someone else's expense." I hung up before he could respond. And as I set my phone down on the kitchen counter, I felt something settle inside me. Not victory, not revenge. Just alignment. Garrett hadn't lost Sterling because of me. He lost it because, for one unguarded evening, he showed exactly who he was when he thought only opportunity mattered. And I had finally seen it too. The week after the wedding felt quieter than I expected. Not peaceful in the cinematic, dramatic sense. Just ordinary quiet. The kind that settles into your apartment when you realize you're no longer checking your phone every hour for someone who never prioritized calling you back. I woke up early on Tuesday morning to sunlight spilling through my curtains. The smell of coffee drifted from my tiny kitchen, dark roast, strong enough to make my nose wrinkle slightly the way I liked it. For the first time in 2 years, I didn't feel rushed. No text from Garrett, no apology messages. No emotional negotiations disguised as conversation. Just silence. And sometimes, silence is the first form of honesty. At work, people were polite but curious. I worked in marketing for a mid-sized publishing company. Nothing glamorous, but something stable and meaningful. My coworkers, not about the breakup, about Sterling, about Marcus, about whether I had somehow stepped into a world bigger than the one I had been living in. I ignored most of it, until Thursday afternoon, when Marcus called. His name appeared on my phone with no explanation, just his number and a simple message: "If you're free, I'd like to talk," nothing formal. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "I'm free at lunch." We met at a small cafe 2 blocks from my office, the kind with wooden tables that wobble slightly and windows fogged by steam from espresso machines. Marcus was already there when I arrived, standing near the counter, hands in his pockets. No corporate energy today. Just a man in a charcoal sweater and dark jeans. "You look less intimidating without a suit," I said as I approached. He smiled. "Good. That's usually the goal outside boardrooms." We ordered coffee. He paid before I could protest. We sat by the window. "I wanted to check on you," he said simply. "I'm okay," I told him honestly. Strangely okay. He nodded as if he expected that answer. "Garrett contacted our legal department earlier this week," he added calmly. I blinked. "Why?" "He wanted clarification on why he was no longer being considered for Denver." I sighed quietly. "And Marcus took a slow sip of his coffee. I told him the truth, he said, that Sterling prioritizes long-term partnership behavior, not just performance metrics. There was something carefully neutral in the way he spoke. Professional distance. Respect. He asked if you had spoken to me, Marcus. I told him I had spoken to you, Marcus said, but that our conversation had nothing to do with his professional evaluation. I felt relief I hadn't expected to feel. Thank you, I said quietly. Marcus studied me for a long moment. You handled yourself very well that night, he said again. But I want to be very clear about something, Paige. I waited. I'm not interested in stepping into a relationship that starts from someone else's rejection. The honesty startled me, and I respected it immediately. I appreciate that, I said. I am, however, he continued with a faint smile, interested in getting to know you as a person, not as someone who just went through a breakup. I laughed softly. Fair. He asked me about my work, about my goals, about whether I had ever wanted to write or create something beyond my current career. I told him about how I loved storytelling, about how I sometimes imagined turning moments from real life into narratives, not revenge stories, not dramatic ones, just emotional truths about people trying to understand each other. He listened, really listened, not like Garrett had listened when he was calculating opportunities, but like someone who was genuinely curious about the shape of my thoughts. That weekend, Chloe came over to my apartment. She brought takeout and sat cross-legged on my living room floor like we were teenagers again. So, she said after we ate in comfortable silence, you're dating a rich executive now. I nearly choked on my noodles. I am not dating him. She raised an eyebrow. He called you at lunchtime. He wanted to check on me. She smiled knowingly. That's how it starts. I didn't correct her, because I didn't know yet what it was starting to become. Instead, I told her the truth about that night, how I had felt invisible beside Garrett, how I had been tired of waiting. She listened, the way she always did, quietly, seriously. You didn't lose anything, she said finally. You just stopped investing in someone who didn't invest back. That stayed. Meanwhile, Garrett's reputation shift continued quietly. Not publicly humiliating, not scandalous, just professional distance. People stopped mentioning him in conversations about future partnerships, not because of rumors, but because trust in business is often built on subtle signals. 2 weeks after the wedding, I received a final message from him. It was short. I hope you're happy. I think I understand now. I didn't reply, not out of cruelty, but because sometimes closure isn't about having the last word. Sometimes closure is silence that doesn't hurt anymore. Chicks is, I wouldn't hit anymore. By the end of that month, I found myself thinking about Marcus more often than I expected. Not in obsessive ways, just quiet curiosity. The way you think about someone who treated you with kindness when you were used to emotional exhaustion. And that is where my story paused. Not at revenge, not at romance, but at something far more valuable. Peace. Healing doesn't arrive like a grand confession scene in a movie. It comes in small, quiet habits. For me, healing started with coffee that I didn't share with anyone. It started with waking up on Sunday mornings and not checking my phone first thing to see if someone had changed their mind about loving me. It started with learning how to live inside my own life again. 2-3 weeks after the wedding, Marcus asked me to dinner, not in a flashy way. Just a text message that felt intentionally simple. If you're free Friday, I know a small Italian place downtown. No pressure, no pressure. Those words mattered to me more than he probably realized. I said yes. The restaurant was warm and dimly lit, the kind of place where conversations feel softer, because Marcus wore a navy button-up shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms. No corporate posture tonight, just relaxed confidence. You look happy, he said when I sat down. I feel lighter, I admitted. We ordered pasta and red wine. Conversation moved easily between us childhood memories, favorite books. He told me he grew up in a family that expected success, but didn't always know how to show affection directly. I learned early, he said, swirling his wine slowly. That achievement was how I earned attention. I didn't say anything immediately. I just listened. I think that's why I noticed you that night. You weren't trying to earn attention. You were just existing in the moment. That comment stayed with me for a long time, because I realized I had spent years trying to earn emotional security from someone who measured worth in strategic advantage. Marcus was different. Not perfect, not magically romantic, just emotionally present in a way that he walked me to my car afterward but didn't try to extend the night. "Take care of yourself, Paige," he said. "You too," I replied. And then I drove home feeling something unfamiliar. Not butterflies. Not anxiety. Just quiet anticipation. Meanwhile, life kept moving. Work promotion. Chloe and Daniel announced they were buying their first house. My parents invited me to Sunday dinners where they no longer subtly asked about Garrett. They had accepted the ending without needing to speak about it. That is love too, quiet acceptance. 2 months after the wedding, I ran into Garrett by accident. It happened at a bookstore downtown. I was standing in the self-improvement section, ironically, when I heard someone say my name. "Paige," I turned. He looked different. Not dramatically. Just smaller somehow. Less polished. Like he had been living inside long meetings and longer nights. "Hi," I said calmly. He nodded. "How are you?" "I'm good," I said honestly. He studied me for a moment. "You look different," he said. "I think I feel different," I replied. That was new. Garrett never used to hesitate. "I wanted to apologize," he said finally. I waited. Not impatiently. Just respectfully. "I shouldn't have called you clingy," he continued. "That was unfair." I nodded slightly. "Thank you for saying that. I was focused on the wrong things," he admitted. "I thought success would make everything else fall into place." "And?" I asked gently. He looked down at his hands. It didn't. Silence settled between us. Not uncomfortable. Just reflective. "I hope you get what you're looking for," I said eventually. He looked at me like he wanted to say more. But he didn't. And that was okay. Because not every story needs a final emotional confrontation. Sometimes closure is just two people acknowledging who they were and who they are now. 3 weeks later, Marcus invited me to a charity gala. Not as a date, just as someone he wanted to spend an evening with. "I like talking to you," he said simply when he asked. "You make me think about things differently." So I went. I wore a deep emerald dress. Nothing flashy, just elegant. That night, Marcus introduced me to colleagues not as someone he met recently but simply as Paige, not defined by relationships. Not defined by my past. Just me. And when we danced near the edge of the ballroom, he said something quietly that stayed with me. "You didn't win that night," he said. "You just chose yourself." I thought about that for a long time afterward, because he was right. I didn't destroy Garrett's career. I didn't orchestrate revenge. I simply stopped shrinking myself to keep someone comfortable. And sometimes that is the purest form of justice life can offer. Months later, I sat on my apartment balcony watching city lights blink in the distance. My phone was silent. My life felt stable. Not exciting in a chaotic way, but deeply peaceful. And I realized something important. Love is not supposed to feel like you are constantly proving you are worthy of staying. Love is supposed to feel like you are already home. So I'll ask you what Auntie May would always ask her audience softly, with that knowing smile. Have you ever stayed too long somewhere just hoping someone would finally see your worth? Because I did, and I learned something powerful. Sometimes karma isn't loud. It doesn't always come with revenge or dramatic confrontation. Sometimes karma is simply this. You stand up for yourself, and life quietly rewards your courage with peace. If you liked this story, tell me in the comments. Would you have walked away the way I did? And as always, take care of your heart. It is listening to everything you tell yourself